Met Xander de Rijke.
My advice to you is seek professional help.
Hello everybody and welcome to Ben je nog aan het kijken, the podcast where we talk to guests about their favorite shows or about their career in television. I am your host Xander de Rijke, and welcome to another special episode where we delve into the career of someone who made our childhood magical. My guest today is an American voice director and voice actor. He was the first voice director for Pokémon and adapted the show from the Japanese version to the show we got to know more than 20 years ago. He stayed on for the first 3 seasons and the first and still best Pokémon movie, Mew vs. Mewtwo. Not only that, but he voiced about 40 of the original Pokémon himself, and yes, he was so nice to do some of the iconic ones later on in the show. Please welcome to the podcast, the original Pokéman himself, Michael Haigney. Okay, Michael, before we get into the Pokémon of it all, I do want to go back a little. I want to talk about a younger Michael Haigney. What did he want to be?
That's all there is.
What did he want to be as a kid, and what did he end up having as a first job?
Well, as a kid, I always wanted to be in some kind of show business. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe a movie director, which means secretly I wanted to be an actor, but was too afraid to tell anyone. Stand-up comedy, which I did a little bit of, very little, was also attractive. But I could see that was a time when, after all the old American comedians like Jack Benny and Milton Berle, there were a new crop of guys like Robert Klein and everything, but they would have to travel around the country and stay in seedy, horrible motels and go to terrible places. And I didn't think I had that wasn't my personality. So originally I wanted to go to NYU Film School, but my parents didn't really want me to go. So I wound up going to Fordham University, but I got lucky. I was studying English and philosophy for reasons which I still don't understand. But at Lincoln Center, it was a Fordham at Lincoln Center, and just a couple of blocks away was the CBS studios in New York. And I just happened to know someone who worked in a college placement office at my college. And I had always told her, look, if there any jobs come through that are fun, glamorous, and pay a lot of money, let me know. And I was at a Beach Boy concert in Central Park, and I called my house, and my mom said, "Oh, Liz called. She has a job for you." It turned out to be an interview for a page at CBS television, and a page was at that time was like an usher, but you also got to work in offices. So anyway, I worked there for a few years, and that was lucky and great because I worked on shows and it just dropped from the sky completely, from nowhere. Luck, 100% luck, which has been, basically all of my jobs. I hesitate to call it a career. That sounds a little bit grandiose, but the line of jobs that I've had have been really just luck. So I worked there, and then I got one of the pages. His father was a director of game shows and live events. And so I worked on New Year's Eve shows and got to meet Jerry Lee Lewis and Donny Osmond. And Donny Osmond's brother I saw in his underwear when he opened the door, and I had to take the thing in there. And and Andy Williams and Steve Martin for about 30 seconds. And so that was great. And then a guy that I had known from the Page office said, do you want to work at this ad agency? He did tons of promos for shows, and that got me working in actually producing shows. I did 3 2-hour specials, annual specials called the Horror Hall of Fame, and got to meet Vincent Price and worked with Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger. And, they played Freddy Krueger and Bela Lugosi's son and Boris Karloff's daughter. And I just got lucky and lucked into that. And then after that, I worked in a live TV thing out in Long Island. And then somebody that I had known was working at this company, 4Kids. And I won't bore you with the story, but I had been doing some adapting Japanese films and a direct to video series called Slayers. And this friend, Norman Grossfeld, was working at 4Kids, which was the licensing company for Nintendo. And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, you do the thing where you replace the voices on Japanese cards." Yeah, I did. And he says, "Yeah, we have this show and I want to, maybe you want to, take a bid on this." And I said, at that time, it was in the news because Pokémon, it was all over the news in America. The show wasn't in America yet, but there was an episode which is famous among Pokémon fans, the Porygon episode. There was at least one sequence where there were flashing lights, and apparently it triggered some kids who had a kind of, I don't know if strictly an epileptic fit, but it sent kids to the hospital. Yeah. So I said, it's not that serious. It sent the kids to the hospital, right? And he said, "Yeah, but we're not going to show that one." And so that's how he got it. And so he sent an episode over, and I was working with someone, Larry Juris. We had like a company that did this, he did music for some things, and then I did these, adapting show. And I looked at the show, the first episode of the series, and I said, "Larry, he tried to get as much money up front as possible because this is never going to go more than 13 episodes. It's out there and this is not going to make it." So it goes to show, the powers of prognostication that I had. I mean, the show's still on. It's still new episodes for 25 years. It was an absolute, I don't have to tell you, it's a huge phenomenon all over the world.
Yeah, it's amazing that somebody can go from an usher to directing or voice directing. It's all about luck, apparently. Yeah.
For me, it was. It really was lucky. I was just thinking the other day. I think I've only been on 2 job interviews. One was for the Page job in 1977. And I went on another one, which I don't even remember what it was, but I went on another interview. All the other ones I got through people with whom I worked or knew, but kind of some of them I just knew kind of slightly. It was really I had a great run. It hasn't been, the last decade hasn't been so great, but as work is concerned, but I put in a lot of hours in the previous decade. So, it averages out.
But I do feel just by talking to you for a couple of minutes, you seem to be a great ad-libber. You're pretty quick on your feet.
I've written a lot of ad libs over the years.
So what was your first impression of the franchise? I can imagine.
As I said, I watched that first episode, and because I'm doing, I started recording a podcast series based on my memories of doing the show called Original Pokéman, which will be out soon, depending. I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but or be out there because things don't air anymore. But
around May.
Oh, okay. So it'll definitely be out. Almost definitely. I said that in March 2021. But my first impressions of the show. See, I knew nothing of the game, but the game was already taking hold, especially in Japan. But I think it was still starting to become popular here, but not the wave of popularity. And so, I'm not exactly ashamed to say it, but I don't think I've ever played the game or seen the game for more than 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. I think like the second year it was on, Norman gave me a little thing for the kids. I didn't have kids then. Eventually I got like a little game and I looked at it and I saw, the Pokemon running around and didn't particularly. I had gotten all of my video game stuff out with Atari because I'm older. I had the bleary eyes with Spider Attack and Spider Fighter and Asteroid and all that stuff. So I was over the video game thing when this came out, and so I looked at the show and it. I had seen anime. I'd worked on anime, and it's like, oh, it's a kid, and it's these little things, and they run around, and they're kind of like slave animals, kind of, and they fight each other, and it's kind of dark. I mean, the first episode is a little, it's not Daffy Duck. I mean, it was kind of a little bit, there were some sort of darker elements of it with getting attacked by these things. And I just thought, I don't know. I mean, I just didn't think it had the elements of a show that American kids who watch, but what do I know? I mean, I obviously nothing, because it just latched in both certainly the game and to a great extent the show. The show was hugely popular too. Of course, it had the thing of, it had the video game and it had the show, but it also had the cards. In America, at least, the cards were just everywhere. I used to take the train, into work, and every day kids would be, I'd see the cards and cards of characters that I was voicing on the show. And they were everywhere. And I don't know what it was like in Europe, but it got to the point where, they were being banned from schoolyards. Kids couldn't bring Pokemon cards to school. It was a huge juggernaut of success that I don't think, if anybody says they predicted it in the way that you can predict the flip of a coin, I think. At least that's how I feel.
Well, it's funny you said that. You said before about the show already, being talked about in America long before it aired. And that was kind of the same thing here. I remember being a kid and I was with my mother at the beach and she was reading a newspaper, and the newspaper had a full page about Pokemon. The show hadn't aired an episode in Europe yet, but just announcing the show. And I had never seen that before. A kid's show having like a page-long announcement with pictures of the different Pokemon. And I remember reading it and looking at it and thinking, like, what's this about?
Why would this? Yeah.
There's a rat character. These are just animals. It's a yellow mouse. Totally not convinced. And within a year, I was collecting cards, playing the game, wearing the shirt.
Of course. Yeah. It was, I think it was part, as I said, working on this podcast, I've been thinking about, because I'm sure, you do a lot of shows and things, and being on the side of the production side is much different than being on the consumption side. I would just keep my head down, trying to keep my head above water with the air dates and that kind of thing. Of course, I was completely aware of how it was building, and then we did the movie, and there was that's a whole other thing. And so, I was aware of it, but it was just so phenomenal. But I think part of it was in the US anyway, cable TV for kids was definitely coming in. But I think Pokemon was really just about the last gasp of a huge hit for kids that was on broadcast TV, that was on free TV, because the individual stations, it was syndicated originally. That means, in the US, it's like you have owned and operated stations that were affiliated with a network, and then you have other independent stations. And it was syndicated mostly to independent stations, as far as I recall. But it was all over the country, and they still had slots for kids shows. Just a few years after that disappeared. Mainly because of, the economics of it, and also because kids TV was kind of migrating to cable. The broadcasters were afraid of content issues. There were a lot of things in the US where, you couldn't like, for example, we couldn't advertise any Pokemon products within the Pokemon show. That would have seemed that blurred the lines in the US as far as broadcasting is concerned. So all the ads for the Pokemon stuff would air outside, but we could still have that kind of synergy where right before the show there would be ads for Pokemon, then there would be the show itself, and then afterwards there would be that kind of thing. But the thing is, every kid in America could see that show as long as they had a TV. Later when it broke up more, and certainly now where programming is so fragmented, where there are just hundreds of places where you can get shows. There are very, very popular shows that the vast majority of people have never even heard of. And stars that are unbelievably popular with people on, with a certain group that no one else, your neighbor has never heard of this person. So I think Pokemon really hit where the news media liked that kind of thing. It was on everywhere. It had the synergy of feeding off not only the Nintendo media, power, but the cards also. So it really was a unique kind of thing that I think would be very, very hard to duplicate now.
I can imagine it was a big hit from the start. Did you ever see any ratings like in the first season?
From my recollection. Now, I'm very careful to say this, and I keep saying it in the a couple of episodes I've started. Mm-hmm. These are my memories, and I'm very, very wary of not only other people's memories, because I've heard people connected with the show say things that are not true, but I'm also a little bit skeptical sometimes of my memories too, because I've become aware of listening to other people tell stories over and over again, especially over the decades. They kind of ossify, and I think sometimes they sort of morph into entertaining anecdotes or things that tend to put the teller at the center of the success of whatever they're talking about. I'm no different, but I like to be aware of it anyway. But I think your question was about was I aware of the success of it? Is that?
Yeah, like was it a big hit from the start? Did you see it in the ratings?
I think it was I think it was popular from the start. And when I say from the start, in the first year, because. It was instantly, I don't think there was ever any doubt of being picked up for the second season. So we had a constant thing. As I said, I was at the very beginning, we did get a little bit of a head start because the show had been on a season in Japan. And so we would get the episodes, and I had a few months lead time of adapting. We would get I would get a translation of the script, like what they call a literal translation. Not that there really is any such thing. There's always some kind of interpretation, but it wasn't worked over. So then I would work it over because we had to try to fit the flaps, the lip flaps, and the timing of the characters, of what the characters said, which was always a challenge. And then I had to make it, I felt I had to make it funnier and more entertaining than what came in. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't entertaining, but I think it was, I remember seeing a famous comedian, Bob Hope, saying he would say to his writers when they would come with a radio script, he didn't think it was funny enough. He used to say it was a little bald on gags. And what he meant is like, you need to funny it up a little bit. And I felt that. Now, am I talking too much?
No, you're talking exactly the right amount.
Okay, good. So just hold up your hand or blow a horn or something when you want me to stop. But I don't get to decide. Not that many people ask me about this, and so I have a lot of stored up things.
Oh no! I believe me, as a guy who doesn't have English as a first language, I love having guests who just talk away.
Okay, great. Thank you for being kind. But anyway, so. I've only fairly recently, like within the past year, become aware of all the stuff that's on about the show and about, specifically about the show. I mean, I think that part of it is that the people who were kids at the time of the show are now at the point where they have kids of their own, and they've started to see what that next stage of life is, and they're seeing things that their kids are enjoying, and they're getting to the point where, well, when I was a kid, that there's a point, I don't know if you're at it yet, where when I was a kid, this is what we did. And you have a little bit of time for that nostalgic reflection. And I think that that's hitting in with a certain group. And, I was always aware of, or I became aware when I started really thinking about it, when it was it was going on for a few seasons, that in the US anyway, this was an after school show, but there were also the places where they put it on in the morning and the afternoon. So kids would see it before they went to school and after they came home. But I always was aware of kids coming home, and a lot of kids come home by themselves. And I knew when I was a kid, I wasn't by myself when I was come home. I had a brother and family and everything. And there used to be local TV hosts in New York where there were comedians sort of, and they'd do sketches, and then they'd interpolate, an old Popeye cartoon or Felix the Cat or whatever. And there were shows like that all over the US. I don't know about in Europe if they had that a lot, but they did it in New York. And I loved Soupy Sales and Chuck McCann and Sandy Becker and Captain Jack McCarthy and all those kind of things. And every community had their own, Cowboy Bob or Captain Allen or whatever it was. But anyway, and I knew that those are real. I just loved it. It was for kids, but it didn't dumb it down to anyway. I always was aware of some kid that this is, and even when shows, even other shows, although the other shows I worked on were not as good as Pokemon. Well, maybe, but there are a couple of shows that I thought were better, but I always was aware that there are some kids, there were kids that would come home and this is the highlight of their day, that this is something that they really related to because we could see the popularity of it was there. And so I always tried and failed a lot, but always tried to, if I could tweak that gag or get that lip flap a little bit better or get that one more reading, which I had in my head, but maybe the actor didn't have it in her or his head, to try to do that. I always tried to be aware of that. There were always there were always the pressures of time and scheduling, and you just got to get this done. And I'm not saying that I didn't let things go. I let a lot of things go. And I also, I think I don't want to say improved, but I started to understand a little bit how you put lines and how you reformulate jokes and how you set up gags and that kind of thing. In the context of the show, I mean, it's kind of like a straitjacket. I used to say I don't know if it's a talent, but it's a craft where you have to fit this number of syllables and this number of flaps and kind of get a joke, but then you don't have the time, but you have to get a little ingot of information. It was a very specific craft. And I started doing all of the adaptations, and I was directing all of the episodes as well. But after a pretty short time, don't ask me how long because I don't remember, but in that first year, another guy who worked with us, Jim Malone, started directing, and I was really on the scripts, and it was tough to catch up, and it was tough to stay ahead of the airing schedule. And it became a really demanding thing. And at a certain point, we started to bring in other people. And I remember people that were really talented, funny people that would come in and say, I want to do that. You do that? I'd love you to try this script. And it wasn't that they weren't good. It's just like, I can't try to match the flaps. I mean, this is crazy. It drove me nuts. At that time, it wasn't digital either. I had an old TV set that had been, it was like a freebie that we had taken from the Horror Hall of Fame. And it was a combination it was like a 12-inch screen, and it had a VHS in it. And I had a little remote that you rewind it, over and over, trying to say the gags out loud, saying the jokes and the lines to try to fit into those flaps. I mean, it'd drive you nuts. I mean, it was a short drive for me, but I mean, it was really a challenge that was not for everyone.
So how much time was there between receiving the tapes and having a finished American episode?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the beginning, as I said, we would get the translation, and then it was time coded, which is there's a running time code at the bottom of the screen with number, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, and it would have the beginning of the first flap and the end of the last flap of each line. And then, of course, the name of the character. And so we would go line by line, adapting and trying to fit, either stretching or condensing the idea of the original line, trying to add gags that didn't conflict with, the rules of the Pokemon world. And that would usually took about a week to do that. But it also, because I was directing too, after, several weeks, I think when we first got it, I think we had about a 4-week lead. I don't know. Somebody's going to online will say he's an idiot. It wasn't 4 weeks. It was 5.5 weeks. And maybe you're right. I mean, I don't have a strong memory of it because it was just like waves hitting me, just constantly. But it would take about a week to write the episode, and it would take about depending on how many characters there were and how much dialogue there was, although there was generally the same amount of dialogue in each episode, it would take about 4 days to record the episodes. We would record each actor separately. We didn't get around like they do in Pixar and a lot of other places where they record the dialogue first. They get around a microphone they interplay with each other. We didn't have that. We never did that. We couldn't schedule that because we'd have to pay. They got paid by the hour, so everybody would have to be paid for hours and hours and hours. The budget wasn't there for that. So it would take about 4 days, and then to mix, and in some of the episodes, the 4 kids added music as well. And then I would review the mix and have notes and whatever, and then it would go out. So it was like 2 weeks, but the thing is, it was checkerboarded. I would be working on the script for episode 5, but I would be recording episode 4, that kind of thing. But then when it caught up with me, then I was behind. And there were many times when I would get a call from the studio saying, Eric Stewart's in the booth and we need page 12. What are you going to be? It's like, I have the punchline, but I don't have the gag. We would fax page by page and they'd be waiting for it. And many, many times, instead of writing, from the first page to the last page, I would just write all of Jesse's lines because I knew that Rachel was coming in, or I would just write one and then hope that I would have like a punchline or a setup for a gag or whatever later on. And so it was a lot of work.
What were some of the cultural differences you had to remove or adapt just because this is unknown to a Western audience?
Yeah, I mean, online and even at the time, there was email and stuff then, but it wasn't like now. So we would get letters and we would see, like, I guess, just through the grapevine, guys who were fanboys that worked at 4Kids. Originally, I didn't work for 4Kids. They had our own company. And then after that, I went to 4Kids after a few seasons of Pokemon to work on Kirby, an animated version of Kirby. And then I was essentially off Pokemon. But we were very aware, and I am aware now very much of people saying, "Oh, they're trying to de-Japanify the series." And as I say in the podcast, Original Pokémon, that was never my intent. I mean, I didn't. If I had the inclination to do that, I wouldn't have even had the time, and I didn't have the time or the inclination. Now, it is true that 4Kids. I believe it was 4Kids, but it could have been the Nintendo. They would occasionally, and more than occasionally, change Japanese language banners and things like that. And there were some visual gags that couldn't be changed. I remember one. I mean, there's a famous one, which I'll get to, which I take total blame and responsibility for. And I will go to my grave vilified by these people. And you are 100% right. But there was one I remember. There was a sign, there was some gag with Ash, who is the protagonist of the show, and Pikachu, and you had a kind of comic banter that would go back and forth, especially in the beginning, antagonistic. And Ash said something, and Pikachu responded somehow, not in language, and then Ash, all of a sudden I see that Ash is on pillow or throwing pillows or kneeling on pillows or something. And it's like in a completely different sentence. So I asked the translator, Paul Taylor, who worked for 4Kids, it's like, do you have any idea what this? Oh yeah, this is like in like kabuki or something, or Japanese theater or no theater, which when they do this, it's a comic thing and pillows thrown. And it's like, what do I do with that? I don't know. I haven't gotten to that episode. I did something with it, but I can't remember what it is. But there were certain things like that at that time we weren't editing things out because we didn't want to change the time. Mm-hmm. Later, it became different. But the big one that I did, which was somewhat innocent as far as I remember it, was there was an episode pretty early, I think, where Brock is eating rice balls.
Yeah.
And you're aware of this, right? No?
I know they're always eating rice balls in the show.
Right. And I made them jelly donuts. I said they were jelly donuts because I said, this jelly donut is really great, Ash. Whatever it was that he said. And because it was the closest thing. Now, why didn't I leave it to a rice ball? That is the question that I answer. Now, I thought that this was only one line, and this comes up. There's even a website that I just found like last week that says it's not a donut, and it's all about Pokemon or whatever. But I changed it because it's like, hey, I am American. I wasn't de-Japanifying it in my thought, if I even thought about it. But I was Americanizing the show, and I thought, well, American kids at that time. This was not where a sushi bar was every place like it is now, where you go into Kroger's and Piggly Wiggly or whatever. It's like, these, supermarket chains in Alabama where they have a sushi bar all of a sudden. This was not common. And so I thought, what it is. So it looked like a white thing. And it was kind of a square where the seaweed was. I'll make it a jelly donut. I thought it was only one reference, but I just recently, my daughter sent me something because now she's at college and all these kids are remembering and hearing that I'm the Pokemon guy, and they're sending her stuff. There were like 30 references in this episode. Hey, get those donuts. Hey, that's a great donut, Ash. I'm like, oh God, I must have done it half a dozen times at least in the episode. It was totally wrong. But I wasn't trying to, to me, I was adapting the show for an American audience.
Of course.
And now maybe that was a mistake. But what I have only recently learned is that like the rice balls, the onigiri, I think I'm pronouncing it right, onigiri.
Yes.
This is like there's probably something in Belgium that is, but this would be like in the America, like, oh, you come home from school and you have milk and cookies. But like this would be like exponentially more pervasive in Japan. Like every kid would always have onigiri, and this is the comfort food. This is the mom. This has so many childhood connections. Like I am spitting on Japanese motherhood by not by changing onigiri. And I am taking this opportunity to apologize to everyone in Japan, in Japanese territories, in the United States, Canada, Belgium, the Benelux countries, the low countries, high countries, everywhere. I am sorry. It was 100% wrong of me, but it wasn't my aim it was just to I wasn't, I don't think that wasn't my thing. It was just, how can I make this? And it was really, really bad and wrong. And I apologize. And whatever insult you want to give me, I deserve it. So bring it on.
No, I was under the impression that everything before and after an episode itself was added for American TV.
Well, okay. So that was Norman. The Norman Grossfeld, as I said, I worked for another company that I had a partnership with Larry Juris, and Norman Grossfeld, who was the president of 4Kids at that time. They were the licensing company for Pokémon, and so that means that they got all the deals for lunch boxes and party hats and anything that was not a video game. That was something else, but all this other stuff, and so they got the job to adapt the show for American TV, and then they hired Larry and me to do that. And so what was your question again? I'm sorry.
No, I was under the impression that everything before and after an episode was added for American TV,
yes.
like
okay.
that. Who's that Pokemon? Like stuff like that.
Right. That's now, as far as I know, there's other material that was in the original show. There were these little music videos that were for several minutes, and they usually came on the ends of the show, and it would be like Pikachu bouncing around with little flowers and Ash and everything. My recollection is that those seemed to Norman and to the people at 4Kids that they seemed to be reading a little bit young. They seemed to be a little bit younger than the target audience for this show. I mean, the general wisdom of kids TV is, if you're aiming if you think you're going to get 8-year-olds, you make it a 10-year-old show, because an 8-year-old will always want to watch a show for 10 or 12-year-old kids. But a 12-year-old kid will generally with the possible exception of seemingly My Little Pony, they will not want to watch a show for 8-year-olds. Okay, so I think what I understand is Norman did that Poke Rap, which is also a big part. I guess they had those. Okay, and this was and the Who's That Pokemon. I don't believe that the Who's That Pokemon was ever in the Japanese show, but it was like these little wraparound, like how can we get the kids? It wasn't exactly interactive, but for that time, it was kind of interactive because Who's That Pokemon? And it really kind of fed into that thing with Pokemon, with kids being able and wanting to memorize those 151, I guess, original Pokemon. And it just somehow it struck a real chord with so many kids of being able to memorize those things. And so I know who that is. That's Rattata. And then they come back. And then the Pokemon, it just was a total marketing reinforcement of gotta catch them all. I think there was a similar catchphrase, sort of tagline or whatever you call it, catchphrase in the Japanese show, but the gotta catch them all, from my recollection, that was Norman coming up with that version of I think there was a Japanese slogan, but the gotta catch them all was like, hey, buy every card, get every game, watch every show, play the game constantly. And would it have worked without it? Maybe, but it seemed to really the kids. But I had nothing to do with the Poke Raps, or we would sit in the booth and let's get a half of those people. Who's that Pokemon? We did that one. It's Rattata. It's Psyduck. It's we would just do those over and over and over again, for upcoming shows. But that was a big part of the show too. But it's a part that I had virtually nothing to do with.
Yeah, because for us, it seemed that was made for the commercials, to have like a bumper to the commercials, because I think it's more common in America to even have in 20-minute shows to have a commercial in there. And we don't do that. We just show the full 20 minutes.
Yeah, it sort of evolved in kids TV. It used to be that, like way back, like Howdy Doody, and then they would sell the commercial would be Wonder Bread, and Howdy Doody's picture would be on that. Then as the 70s came in, there were more and more rules, like you can't advertise let's say you had the Pokemon show, you couldn't have an ad, a commercial for a Pokemon product inside the show. And there was also a rule that you had to have a bumper that made it clear that the programming part was ending and that a commercial was coming up, and then coming out of the commercial that now we're back to the show. So that was also that. And that was also another reason why I don't think you've seen really another Pokemon, is because it became so difficult to have, with those kind of what were perceived by advertisers and marketers, at least, as restrictions on broadcast TV. That's why kids programming essentially in the US anyway disappeared from broadcast TV, because there were also rules like you couldn't have, like, for example, and I think it's still true, but it doesn't come up anymore because there's so little kids programming. Like if you came up with a Barbie doll, for example, you couldn't have a Barbie show. If you had a Barbie show first, and then you made a doll out of the character, then you could have a show. But you couldn't have a show based on a thing. But now that I'm thinking of it, there was a G.I. Joe show. And so I'm not sure exactly how they got around that.
Yeah, and Transformers is also a show, I think, that started out as
yeah, that's true. You're right.
Boys.
Yeah, but of course the rules evolved too. And then, now, of course, anything can go on cable, because there are essentially no restrictions except the ones that the cable casters and the individual, channels want to put on themselves. But yeah, there were a lot of restrictions, and that's why eventually, the kids' TV evaporated, for broadcast in the U.S. anyway.
I did want to talk a little bit about the voice acting in the show. How did you cast some of the voices for all those characters? Did people audition, or did you make them do what they thought a character should sound like?
Well, we had I had worked with a bunch of actors for both the first. I did a Japanese movie called Golf Force, and then from that. We did other shows. There was a limited series called This Is Greenwood, which was a Japanese series, which I liked very much. I thought was a good show about kids in school, a lot of the typical Japanese kind of thing, but yeah, nice, emotional, and the kind of things. I think that was 12 episodes, and so I knew some actors from there. And then I did Slayers, which was a direct-to-video series, again, an adaptation from a Japanese series. And so I knew from actors from there. So I think Gowry was a character in Slayers. And so we brought Eric Stewart in, and he became Brock. And then eventually, when Ted Lewis dropped out, Eric also did James from Team Rocket. And so I think Rachel Lillis, who did the voice for Misty and also for Jessie and also a bunch of Pokémon, she had worked on Slayers too. The Veronica Taylor, stage name for her actress who did Ash, I think she had worked on, I can't remember, but yeah, so we had that, but we also did auditions because we had worked with a company called Central Park Media who did a lot of things direct to video. And so we got some actors from there. I don't think we ever advertised, but we would have them do them. And then what I would do was I would have like 2 or 3 picks for each main character. And for human characters. And then I would send those over to Norman at 4Kids for approval. Then they would say, oh, this one or A or B, or whatever. And then for the Pokémon, I tell the story right in the beginning of on the podcast that I'm working on. I knew that there were 150 or 151, depending on how you count them, original Pokémon. But I didn't know a lot about this. I didn't know anything about the series unless, except the stuff that was in the episodes that I was getting. And so I figured, well, okay, if, we'll have this character, Bulbasaur. Okay, Bulbasaur will be in that episode. Okay, but we have 150 more and they got 51 episodes. The next one will be the next Pokemon, and it'll be like a one-off for each Pokemon. So it was like, okay, so, here's Rattata. You know what? We had got an hour left in the studio because we finished a little early with Rachel or with Erica. Like, I'll just go, Rattata. I'll do it. Let me just jump in the booth and I'll do it. Because as I said at the beginning, Xander, I'm a frustrated actor. Or I don't know how frustrated I was, but too timid to be an actor. But now I'm in charge. So, hey, I'll do it. I can imitate the Japanese voice. So I'll do it. Rattata. Okay. But see, I didn't know that Rattata was going to be in 72 episodes or that Charmander and Psyduck, and they're going to keep traveling with him and coming out and doing stuff. So it's like, oh my God. So I get that they would give us, when they gave us the scripts, they would give us a line count because that's how we scheduled the actors. We figured, depending on the actor, say okay, on an average, let's say, taking everything into consideration, 3 minutes per line, and then if they have more than 50, then we'd have to take a break. So that we had like an algorithm, the rough algorithm for figuring out. And it's like, okay, and it says, I'll just jump in. And so then I kept doing this, and then I just did more and more. Now, some of the Pokemon, there were a few that we kept. Pikachu is always, and I still think to this day, although I'm very unfamiliar with the show after I left it, I think Pikachu has always been the same person, the same actress, and we didn't replace Pikachu. There were a couple of others that just either made a sound and didn't really say their names, or I've made mistakes in there too, or said their names that just sounded like a sound, so we left it in. We didn't know. Oh, it's saying the Japanese name. Yeah,
it does come up a lot that sometimes in Japanese animation or Japanese language, they tend to use the English word. It does keep popping up. There's a couple of Pokemon who just sound the same in every double sub.
Yeah, exactly. That you're exactly right, Xander. And so there were some of those, but a lot of them were just fill-ins, and that's why I've been saying I did about 40. I'm not so sure anymore because again, I keep doubting my memory about things, but so I'm only going to verify. I think I've done at least 30 different Pokemon characters, but it may be as much as 40 or 45. I'm not 100% sure. But as I go through as I said, I'm working on this podcast, I'll go through and I can hear when it's me generally. So, so far. So, I've been voicing the ones that I've been claiming that I voiced. And there were some times when, of course, oh, Eric's away. And so I guess you got to go, oh, Ash, and I got to try to imitate it. And of course, now I've seen in episode 76 at 3 minutes and 10 seconds, that's not Eric, that's Michael Haigney. I was like, I thought I did a seamless job, but I guess not. And there were also sometimes when either I or somebody else would, if somebody was not there, I would double, like fake a Pokemon or something. So, including those, I think I was up around 40 or maybe upwards of that.
Seems like a fun job to just, fill in some holes.
Well, I think Xander and maybe, you being a performer, a comedian, doing so many different things, maybe I'm sure people come and say, oh my gosh, you're a comedian, you're up there. People are loving you. They're going to think must be a fun job. Well, yeah, it was a fun job, but it's also a job and it's work. And there are times when it's like, oh my gosh, I need a new set. What am I going to say? I can't sell that thing again. I mean, do you find that too? I mean, I can relate to the work pressure you have, of just delivering something on time and interacting with people about it. But, I do find the pleasure in it's still a sandbox. What you did or what I do is still a sandbox. So, that little part when you can go in the booth and just, claim something and mess around with a voice seems a lot like fun. You know what it was? There wasn't anybody with whom I worked who I disliked. Our engineers was great. Our recording guys was great. The actors were fun. They were busy too, a lot of them. So it was like, hey, how you doing? Oh, okay, great. Oh, we joke around. Oh, gotta go. It was like that. I'll say this. The deadlines of the show could be like, oh, and I said, faxing the line. I can't think of anything, Larry. Give me 5 more minutes. I didn't particularly enjoy that, but I never felt like, oh, I have to go in today and do this. I don't ever remember feeling that way. And it never seemed on Pokémon anyway. It never seemed like a job, like that people had jobs. Like I would go in the subway, like, oh, look at that guy, man, he's going to a job. And I never felt that way. And I always had creative people around me, or I was around them, however you want to put it. And it didn't seem like that kind of a job. Now, it wasn't regular hours, for better or worse. It was, I would be there till, at the Larry's office at 3:00 in the morning and going home and then get, so it was wacky hours. But I don't regret it. And I don't remember, I never hated it. I always, knew that it was a fun thing. And I'll tell you, we had a million laughs with, and, just laughing and stuff, working with people that day in and day out. It was just, I've had so many laughs in my jobs, and I think of guys in just not horrible jobs, even nice jobs, but never had the laughs that I had. So I'm really grateful and happy of the career. I hate that word, but of the jobs the string of jobs that I've had, and Pokemon was really a jewel in that chain. I think that's a very mixed metaphor, but because the thing is, it was a giant machine, and I was a cog in that machine. I can't estimate what size cog, but I would say on the small side. But the thing is, for the TV show, I'd say it was, a fair size cog. And, but to be part of a big hit show that everybody knows, there is nobody. I always do, like people say, even now, like, oh, what did you do? Oh, well, most of the time I worked in animation. Oh, really? Yeah. What kind of shows? Oh, I worked on a show. And I always do it kind of like, oh, I worked on a show called Pokémon. It's sort of not passive aggressively, but like, if you're don't even try to act like you don't know what Pokemon is. Everybody knows. Vladimir Putin knows what Pokemon is.
Oh, yeah.
I wish you were thinking more about Pokemon these days. But
two things I still wanted to talk about. A couple of years into the show, the first movie came out.
Yes.
Was that a big change up from directing the series, or did it just feel like a long episode?
There was, I think that they felt that there was a lot at stake, and I worked with a very good guy named John Toohey, and also with Norman was involved with that script as well. We went into like a real big, movie recording place with a couple of great guys there. And then we did a mix. I think the first movie we did a mix in the Brill Building, which is I had worked there actually before, but the Brill Building in Manhattan, which was the real headquarters, or one of the two headquarters for especially late 50s, early 60s music hits. And it was just, you had music publisher Don Kirshner and all those guys. I think he was in Brill Building. But anyway, like a real screening room, and Peter, I can't remember his last name. He was a great guy too. Mixed the movie. Maybe I'm mixing that up now, but no pun intended. But it seemed like a longer episode. But what was cool was the premiere was in California at Grauman's, and now it's called Mann's, I guess, Chinese Theater. Mm-hmm. And they had sent like these Volkswagens painted and tricked out to look like Pokémon, like Pikachu. And they were driving all over the country. I think you could win one or something. I can't remember. So that was there. And so I was in California for that. And the premiere that I was at was absolutely packed. And Grauman's that's a big theater. I mean, I don't know how many seats there are, but there's a lot. And I remember about 4 or 5 rows ahead of us, David Hasselhoff was there with his kids. And when the logo for 4Kids came up with the ball and everything, the place went wild. I mean, there were so many kids. And I remember that was the first time, about 4 or 5, 10 minutes maybe into the show, somebody was an usher came down and threw some guy out because he was recording it, like bootlegging it, like videotaping it, with the video camera in the middle of his chest. They caught him and they got him. But it was. I tell you, when that thing came up and we got laughs of things that I had written and stuff. I got to say, that was a big highlight for me. That was to have a move, and then. I directed the movie. I didn't direct the movie. I directed the voices of the movie. That the Japanese did. But I think I added some gags, and people liked the gags, and it really played like a movie. I mean, critics hated it, but the kids liked it, and to just have that. I mean, for a while it was a record-holding movie. It was the highest. It was like a very obscure record. I think it was Warner Brothers' highest grossing movie that opened on October for a long time. In October, I guess not a lot of great movies open in October, but it may be horror movies, I guess, horror movies. But that was a big thrill. That was a big thrill when that came up. That was great.
I do remember it being a big event because in my recollection, it was one of the first times a TV show got a movie.
Yeah. Especially a kids' TV show that was I mean, they had tried. Maybe it was Astro Boy came after that. I think they rebooted Astro Boy as a CGI.
That's a later movie, Astro Boy,
which didn't do well. I think maybe it was too long, whatever. But yeah, did you see the movie as a kid? Or do you remember? Or?
Oh yeah, I went to see it in the cinema. We got it in English also. The movie was never dubbed in Dutch.
Oh, okay.
So I saw it in all the original language, the English language, of course.
How was it as how old of a kid were you? Do you remember?
Let's see. That's I think it released in Belgium in 99 or 2000.
Around something like that.
So I was 13.
Okay, and so was your English good? I mean, your English seems sensational.
Oh, thank you.
But did you struggle with it or no?
No, of course we have subtitles here, but but
did it seem weird to have different? It's quite a while ago. Do you remember if it seemed weird to have different voices for those characters that you were so used to having?
No, because the first thing I thought was our Dutch voices were pretty close to them.
Mm-hmm.
It did some pretty good voice acting, and also the thing that threw me off, because the thing that threw me off is that there were a lot of Pokemon in the movie we hadn't seen in the show yet. So it was like this little exclusive thing. Like I
oh
don't
my
know.
gosh.
We didn't have, we hadn't seen the next 150.
Right,
So
right. Yes.
and
That's interesting.
and Mew was 151. So
Right.
the movie starts with Ash doing this battle by the seaside.
Yeah.
And he gets out all his Pokemon, and there's I don't know what the name is, Donphan or something. I think it's called.
Donphan, yeah.
You know, a little elephant thingy. That
Rolled up. Yeah.
We hadn't seen that before, so we were like, "Oh my God, is that 152?" Is it?
Yeah, and the thing is, there's a lot to be said for seeing things on a big screen. I mean, it was a big screen in Grauman's, and yeah, that was a good feeling because you know. Maybe way back or so, people didn't cheer in movie theaters. I mean, now I guess I would guess the Marvel movies definitely people are cheering. You know, especially the first nighters or the
event movie. The dawn of the event movie.
Yeah, and so they're but to have a whole, couple thousand, I guess it was a couple thousand, or many hundreds of kids just cheering and whatever. That's a good feeling. And I've been lucky too in my string of jobs, not career, is that I never worked on anything that I thought was, well, don't take this the wrong way, that I thought was bad. I've done bad, like not quality good things. I did the best I could, but that was, like a horrible, like that. I think that's what kept me out of movies. I love seeing, shoot 'em ups and I don't mind generally, although now it's a little extreme, like harsh things in movies, but I never wanted to be the purveyor of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a difference between being a consumer and a purveyor, and so I've been lucky that in kids TV and the kids TV that I've been involved with, I think has been pretty benign, and I'm happy about that.
It still holds up after all.
It is. Years. I mean, it's still animal slavery, certainly. But
I've never heard that.
Aside from that, it it's. Do you have another minute?
I have a lot of minutes.
I've just recently read, when I say recently, the last year or so, the original writer of the series, unfortunately died early, and I think he was a suicide. I'm not sure. But he wrote something, and I always like when people say he wrote something before he died. Well, yeah. But it would be tough to write it after. He wrote something that he wanted to see. He became disillusioned with the series because he thought it was going to be like most of the Japanese things they kind of vaguely defined, like it's going to run for 3 seasons or 2 seasons. That's it. It's an arc of a story that begin, middle, and end, and it's planned from the beginning. And I think he went on and on because it's just, Nintendo, why would they stop it? I mean, it's a huge thing. And his thing was that he wanted the series to end with Ash looking back, and he wanted, I think, also either in the series or in a movie to do things where Pikachu and the people, the Pokemon rather, revolt, and they say that this is slavery, and then Ash understands or whatever, and they fight back and whatever. I mean, that's never going to happen. But yeah, Ron and I, the recording engineers, like, it's basically slaves that are bad. It's like cockfighting. That's really what it is. and you put there and then okay, yeah, I take the rooster if you lose. All right, or you die, whatever. We had a lot of questions about the show, like, what are they eating? Like, are they eating each other out in the wild?
I was going to ask that. Like, sometimes you see characters eat fish or sushi or like a chicken leg. Are they eating?
Xander, yeah. I mean, you go on the internet, and I've been on the internet recently trying to, because I just can't. I originally thought that I'm just going to say, I'm just going to go episode by episode saying what I remember. But then I say things like, let me see if there's something on the internet. And boy, is there always something on the internet about that. This is a thing. And, like Nintendo has like Bible, like the style guide for their. Yes, there are other, and in the first couple of episodes, a Pidgeotto eats a worm. So we're like, okay, so there are, so do Pokemon eat other animals? Do Pokemon eat each other? There are some allusions in the series, especially earlier on, to things like this. And yeah, because like, well, where's the hamburger coming from? Is there a cow, or is that like a Tauros that got too old and they put him out to the, to the slaughterhouse? It's like, like a chick. I'm having a sandwich. What's in that sandwich? Okay, obviously it's not a donut, but so. It's like there are questions like that in the Pokemon world. So I've been a little bit, I wouldn't say happy, or pleased is too much, but there were some inconsistencies on the Nintendo side, so that I don't feel so bad about the goof ups and things that I've done in the series by putting in stuff that is either wrong or forgetting, whatever. Yeah, there are some consistencies. Apparently there are animals in the Pokemon world, but after the first, early episodes, it was de-emphasized a lot. Yeah. And the other question that we had was, are they on Earth? Like, is this the world? Is the Pokemon world planet Earth? And I think it's a good question because, the cities there, I think there were some goofs there, but is that really supposed to be Tokyo, or is it a city like Tokyo is it another dimension of the world? Is it, and I'm not sure that was ever broached. It wasn't broached on the series when I was working with it, but I don't think it is. I don't think it is the Earth. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, there's your donut fumble is nothing compared to all the ethical questions the show can raise after a while.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, but you're 100% wrong. If you go on the internet, I have to like wear a rubber nose and a disguise that if I ever went to any of the real rabid fan conventions, and they're right. Oh, why did I do that? Oh my gosh.
Well, the funny thing is, you asked me before about my experience watching the movie, and now when I think about it,
yeah,
I remember on the day we went, me and my snot-nosed friends, there was this 30-year-old guy behind us, and we were making so much fun of him, just because we kind of knew this was a kid show, so we were like, we're supposed to be here, but what's your excuse?
What's your excuse? Yeah.
This 30-year-old guy wearing a Pikachu sweater, just, laughing away with jokes from the movie. And now here we are. It's 2022. I'm 34 years old. I'm talking to the original showrunner of voice director of Pokemon about what they are eating.
It's just it was such a part of, as I said before, it was just a fun part of kids' lives, and it was just before the fan base, for most but not exclusively, was fan base. I hate terms like that, but the kids who liked the show, they were just before the hardcore teen years. Although there were a lot of, believe me, there were a lot of closet Pokemon fans that were 15, 16, 17. The other thing that I've found, especially, which isn't really, thinking about it now isn't surprising, that there are a lot of fans, both young and adult, who are on the autism scale. It has the show and the concept really resonates. It really has some element of that memorization and that locking, that ability of people with some kind of, on that autism scale, to be able to focus in and to have a very deep knowledge of and fascination with and focus on things that have a lot of details and elements and specifications. And I've met a lot of really great people at just a few, signings, a couple of them virtual, but one, I'm going to be doing one pretty soon too, but in person, and they're just the nicest people, and they'll tell you, that they're on the spectrum. And it just has, I think, an even more special appeal for them. But it, as you know, I remember that I think it was like between the first and second season, and we were someplace, my wife and I were someplace, and we met a couple of school teachers, and they said, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, I'm a principal of the school. And I said, "What do you do?" I did my typical line. "Oh, I work in animation." "Oh, really? What is it?" Oh, it's a show called Pokémon." "Oh, you thought that I had just said, my name is Charles Manson." It's like, "Oh, you're Pokémon." "Oh, we have those all over." And then so you asked me a good question. Why can't you make something where kids are interested in like history or science that's like Pokemon? Why can't you do that? And you know what? That is a good question. I don't know why, because you'll have a kid who wouldn't know, an amoeba from a paramecium and couldn't care less, but would know every evolution of Caterpie and what levels everything is. Why is that? There is a reason. I don't exactly know what it is, but I think it's that it's some kind of special, vaguely, or I don't know if arcane is the right word, knowledge that's seemed only special for kids. Like, we know this. I think that anything that a kid, it could be in music, it could be in fashion, it could be anything. The kids have something that adults, that their parents, that older people know nothing about. I think that there's an appeal for that kind of knowledge of an immersion in this special, sort of private but shared young, experience, world or thing, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I just think Pokemon just hit in and seems to continue to hit in with that in a unique way.
And also, I think for a lot of people my age, Pokemon was the anime gateway drug.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It set everything in motion. It was my first anime. Yeah. And it seemed like the dawn of anime just started after Pokemon. We got Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! and Dragon Ball Z and
yeah, I mean, see, I'm old, and so the first ones that I remember, I'm getting back to those Saturday weekday afternoon shows, was actually, I guess, Kim of the White Lion a little bit, but Astro Boy came out, and I remember seeing Astro Boy. I think it was on Channel 5 in New York, and there was something, and I've seen it recently. I looked it up on YouTube. There's something odd about it. There's something that's, to me, that seemed, there was something strange. This was not like any other cartoon that I'd seen. This wasn't Woody Woodpecker, Bugs Bunny, Popeye, whatever. It was just strange, the way they talked. That I don't know what it was like in Dutch or in French or any place, but the way it was dubbed, it was crammed in and then came Gigantor and Eighth Man. And so that was like those are in black and white, or they were in the US. Those are the first things. And then it kind of died down. In the 70s, there really wasn't much. I mean, the fans, certainly, fanboys, but you're right. That, and I think it got a lot of people interested in Dragon Ball Z. But see, Dragon Ball Z wasn't really on TV. Mm-hmm. Pokemon was, and then as you said, Yu-Gi-Oh! and Digimon then came on the other stations, and it really was, and so a lot of anime fans don't consider, the real dedicated anime fans would never put, I don't think, Pokemon on a list of their favorite anime, but that was the one that opened up, I think, anime certainly to just the huge thing that it is now. I mean, not that it wasn't big in Japan, but certainly in the US and I think all over the world. So yeah, I think you're right. It was kind of the gateway show.
Well, now almost 25 years later.
Well, yeah, it's 25 years this year, I think, for the Japanese show, for the Japanese television series. But next year in 2023, as far as I can figure it out, is the 25th anniversary of the American version of, or the US version, whatever you call it, of the Pokemon TV series.
Yeah, well, it's still bigger than ever. And I see you're going to cons and you're on Cameo and you're starting the podcast. It must feel great being a part of something that just will live on forever.
I'm desperate to get out of the house, Xander. That's really what it's all about. And everyone in my family agrees. Let's get him out of the house. You know what? It is. I mean, I understand that my part in it was relatively small. I mean, it was a big part of my life, of my working life, definitely. And it's the thing that, when I meet my daughter just went off to college and, oh, Mr. Haigney, hi, could you do and you're like, hey, you can ask him. Yeah. What do you want me to do? The Charmander or the Psyduck? And yeah. So yeah. And I'm fine with that. I was, there was one time when I think some people connected with the show might have been a little bit, how do I put this? I think that they had very mixed feelings about this being the biggest thing they'll ever be connected with. You know what I mean? Because to a certain extent, you're anonymous. It's even then, it wasn't like, people know, especially, the voice actors for, let's say, The Simpsons, they're somewhat known. Maybe you ask a person in the street, they might know one or two. And of course, with the tendency to, especially for movies, to put stars in the voices, like I know that there's some controversy coming up, or at least apprehension with some fans about the Mario movie coming out. Yeah, with some of the people that they've. And there's always like, we're starting an online petition to get the original guy, which is now living, in a trailer in Sausalito. I don't know who it is. I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? I've had people come to me and say, like, I'm starting, and very nice people. I don't mean to, I'm not dragging them in any way. We're getting a petition to get the original, to get Nintendo to put the original people back the way it should be. And it's like, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. That time is gone. And that's what it is. But, I think for actors, especially, maybe it's depending on what your ambitions are. I don't know. It's a little bit of a touchy subject, and it really doesn't affect me because, I've been to just one of these conventions, and it's like a completely alien world to me. And it's like, I think some people think like, this doesn't sound right, but like these are like has-beens. Like this is somebody who's now at the bottom of their career signing these autographs for $50 a throw, whatever. To me, this is the apex of my life. Somebody wants to come over to a card table and talk to me and let me sign something. I think that's great. So
I love your humility about it.
I have a lot to be humble about.
I know, but you tend to talk like you're in the twilight of your career, and I'm just saying you did something that will, stay with people forever and ever. I'm
way past the twilight, Xander. I'm like, and I don't have a career. I had a string of jobs. You know what? I've been super lucky, and I understand that. I really do understand that. For many years, I was almost completely unaware of I knew Pokémon was like a popular show, but the fandom, like, oh my gosh, I grew up with you. It's, it can be really moving sometimes. It sounds corny, but I've had people come up to me and say, there are a lot of kids that did not grow up with happy situations. There are a lot of them, and not just like, oh, I'm lonely, and kids are like, they have issues and whatever. But even not, even kids that have happy child, oh man, this is like a part of that. And to be, you're right. You're 100% right. To be a little part of that they remember and they think about, and that's important to them. Do other people think it's goofy or whatever? Well, some people think, hey, you love football. You dress up like a football player. You put some football player, American football player's name on a jersey, and you spend $100 of that. And then you put and you go to a bar. Everybody thinks, yeah, you're a great guy. But if you put Pikachu on your sweater, you're a weirdo. Well, okay, maybe, but maybe not.
I always say, I don't watch Pokemon anymore. I stopped watching, but I never stopped being a fan. I just. Right. It's like religion. I just had to let it go.
Right. You're not going to mass, but it's part of you. It's part of you, and you could say it's part of your past. But what really is past? I don't know. Is the teacher or the crush that you had in high school, is that past? Well, in a way, yes, but is there it's just part of you, and you're either lightly bearing it or lugging it around, depending on how you feel about it. And it's part of your life, and it being a little bit of something that's a little bit of part of somebody's life. That's a nice thing.
For a couple of years, it bookended. It started and bookended my school days. I woke up, I saw a rerun of Pokémon in the morning.
Okay, so that's right. Yeah, that's what they had, right?
I came home from school and I got my cookie and my juice box, and a new episode of Pokémon appeared. So, and it was the start and the end of just a grueling day at school. And I did that for years.
Yeah. Your mom should have given you a rice ball, I think.
Well, she told me it was a donut, but that's...
I really set myself up for that one.
Michael, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh my gosh, Xander, this is so nice of you to ask me. And I went on your website. I'm looking for something where I want to see you do some comedy in English. And if you can point me to that, it's not happening, right?
No, it's all in Dutch. I'm so sorry. Yeah. It's Dutch speaking, famous in one of the smallest countries in the world.
Oh my God, but I think that's great. I mean, gosh, you get huge crowds too. That's amazing. That's great. Good for you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I've really enjoyed meeting you and having you sit there while I blather on. I'm sorry if I talk too much.
No. I'm so happy when guests just give a little more than a yes and a no. Because then I don't have to, redo some of my stuff or, come up with another question. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, Michael, but I can't let you go without making myself and the listeners really happy by asking you to do a little sizzle reel of all the Pokemon you voiced.
Well, let me say, it actually happened. I just bought this ring light because, as I said, I'm doing the cameos, and those people are so nice too. They just all sorts of situations. It's really can be very touching.
This is the part where I just stare at you while you blabber on.
Okay. Well, so I had thought that the first one that I ever did was Charmander, but it's not true. I did Rattata, and then I also did Charmander, Char. That's Charmander. Let's see. Terrible. Arbok. And let's see. Paras. And I also think I did Parasect. Rhyme. Dear dude. Seal. That's Seal. I believe the evolution of Seal is a Dugong. I did Cubone. Hitmonlee. Wheezing. And coughing. I did Carp. That's Magikarp. Let's see, who else? Tongue. That's Licky Tongue. Now, I've always been citing these. Snorlax, I'm sure I did, although I get him mixed up with Slowbro sometimes, but I think Ted Lewis did Slowbro. So, and let's see. Oh, nobody ever likes, I don't know, maybe they do. Metapod. Let's see, who else can I do? Blastoise. And my favorite, Psyduck. That's my hit parade. That I definitely know I did.
Oh, amazing. Just amazing.
It's something. I don't know if it's amazing, but I got paid for that. Can you imagine?
Did you say people didn't like Metapod?
I don't know. Metapod seems boring. He's just like a cocoon there. He's only like 1 or 2 episodes.
Well, the thing is, he's awful in the game also.
Yeah, I just read something that he's very difficult to capture or something, or he does something bad, or...
No, the thing is, in the game, if you're lucky, you can catch a Caterpie and it evolves into a Metapod.
Right.
And then the Metapod has also the attacks from the Caterpie, so it can do tackle and it can do some damage. But if you just bump into a Metapod and you catch it, the only thing you can do is harden.
Right. And what is that?
That's useless. It just ups your defense. So he can't attack. He just can take punches.
Yeah. So the Metapod, I was kind of unknowingly, because I said I don't ever remember playing the game, which I think was probably so. How could you do the show and not play the game? Maybe you're right, but I took it, if it's in the show, that's what the Japanese wanted in the show, and that's so. I don't have time to play the game, I don't think. I mean, I guess I could have taken time. I did sleep once in a while.
Well, they release a new game every 2 years, so yeah.
Wow, it just keeps going and going, and never, people say, the typical question, which I'm glad you didn't ask, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Did you think it was going to be a hit? Like, everybody always answers no if there are any, whatever. Like, how could I just thought it was 13 weeks and that's it. If that, how wrong could I be?
Now look at now. Now we're like 5,000 Pokémon later.
They have thousands of episodes, I guess, right? They have to, because they do a lot of episodes every season. In the US, it's like, you did maybe 26 of an episode and then you just rerun them. But no, they do a lot of episodes, or they did at that time. I think they still do. It
came to the point that Ash finally won in just like a league, the Pokemon League.
Right, yeah, I did read that.
A kind of a running joke that he always lost all his big battles.
I always lost. Yeah, I don't want to start getting in. I think that was I think that's another element of that show, which was a little different, which was, or at that time it was different. I guess that he wasn't always win. It wasn't like he looked like he was going to win. Then something happened and he came from behind and he was always victorious. Mm-hmm. There were times when he was just like, yeah, well, you don't know what you're doing, Ash. I think kids can relate to that a lot more than, it's less aspirational, but more relatable. You know what I mean?
The one thing he always did to piss people off is he released his Pokemon.
Oh, that really makes them mad. Now I'm just learning all this now because I'm doing research for the podcast. They don't like it, right?
No, because why would you release a Pokemon? Why
would you do that
in the game? You caught him, and he does that constantly. Every end of the season, he just lets them all go.
Just let them go.
Why did we invest all this time in following you around? Awful.
Yeah, you're right.
Awful trend. Thanks again, Michael. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Xander. This is wonderful. Thank you.
This was Ben on het kijken for this week. For the people interested, Pokémon can be found on Netflix and Hulu in every language you want. Michael's podcast is called The Original Pokéman, and you can find it everywhere where podcasts are available. Thank you for listening. Don't hesitate to drop something on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or our Discord if you enjoyed this episode and want to share it with your followers. I was your host Xander de Rijke, and we'll binge again next time on Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Met Xander de Rijke.